The Lemba are an African people whose communities live across Zimbabwe, South Africa, Mozambique, and Malawi. They speak the languages of southern Africa, and their identity has taken root on African soil over many generations. Yet Lemba oral tradition remembers a journey that began far to the north, in Judea, in the land of Jerusalem. According to that tradition, their paternal ancestors were guardians of sacred laws, priests, merchants, builders, and metalworkers who served the God of Israel and preserved the customs handed down through their families. Then destruction came upon Jerusalem. In 587 or 586 BCE, the armies of Babylon conquered Judah. Jerusalem was surrounded. Its walls were broken. The first temple was destroyed, and many people were killed, captured, or driven from their homeland. Lemba oral tradition holds that their ancestors escaped this age of destruction and persecution. They fled to preserve their families, their faith, and the laws entrusted to them. They could carry little. But the story says they carried their identity. They remembered which animals could be eaten and which were forbidden. They remembered that blood must not be consumed. They remembered circumcision, the duties of priestly families, and Jerusalem itself. The exact date and circumstances of this departure cannot be independently reconstructed from surviving written records. The Babylonian exile is documented history. The identification of the departing group with the ancestors of the Lemba belongs to Lemba oral history. That history says the travelers moved south from Judea into Arabia. After crossing difficult country, they reached Yemen, where they settled for generations in a place remembered as Senna. Senna became a central homeland in the Lemba story. Their ancestors lived as merchants and craftsmen, traded across long distances, and became skilled in metalworking. They remained distinct through marriage laws, dietary customs, and the inherited responsibilities of their clans. The tradition also remembers a leader named Buba. His descendants became the Buba clan, long associated among the Lemba with leadership and priestly responsibility. The Buba protected ceremonies, conducted circumcision, guarded sacred knowledge, and helped preserve the memory of the people's origin. But Senna was not their final home. In time, conflict forced the people to move again. They traveled toward the coast and boarded wooden ships. Lemba elders remember a dangerous crossing over the sea. The boats carried families, food, tools, trade goods, and the sacred inheritance of the people. Some accounts say storms separated the travelers and that not everyone reached the same shore. Those who survived landed on the eastern coast of Africa. From there, the journey continued south. Lemba oral tradition traces the migration through regions now known as Kenya and Tanzania, along trade routes linking the Indian Ocean with the African interior. The travelers reached Mozambique and the valley of the Zambezi River before moving farther south. Along the way, migrant men married African women. Their descendants learned African languages and became part of African kingdoms and communities. In this way, an ancient migration memory became part of a distinctly African people. The journey eventually reached the lands now called Zimbabwe and South Africa. The migrants settled among the Venda, the Shona, the Karana, and other African peoples. Here, they became known as the Lemba. Some call them the Basina, the people of Senna. For generations, Lemba communities preserved customs that distinguished them from many of their neighbors. They avoided pork and animals that had died without proper slaughter. They drained blood from meat. They practiced male circumcision, discouraged marriage outside the Lemba community, and treated one day of the week as sacred. Some communities buried their dead facing north and placed stones upon their graves. These practices have parallels in Jewish and Islamic traditions. Customs alone cannot prove a precise ancient origin, but to the Lemba they were not curiosities borrowed in modern times. They were laws carried through family memory. The tradition survived without a written Torah. They traveled in ceremonies, songs, clan duties, and the teachings of elders. The Lemba also remember a sacred object called the ngoma lungundu, the drum that thunders. It was no ordinary drum. In Lemba history, it represented divine presence and protection. It was carried on poles by chosen men. Ordinary people were forbidden to touch it. It accompanied the people during migration and conflict, and those who treated it without respect were believed to face destruction. Because of these similarities, many Lemba associate the ngoma lungundu with the biblical Ark of the Covenant. Some traditions say it was made from part of an earlier sacred object after that object was destroyed. The surviving ngoma cannot be scientifically identified as the ark carried in ancient Israel. It is best understood as the Lemba's sacred ark-like object, a vessel expressing the belief that God traveled with the people. For centuries, outsiders doubted the Lemba account. Colonial writers often treated the tradition as a legend borrowed from Arab, Muslim, or European sources. But the Lemba had preserved their migration story before modern genetic laboratories studied their ancestry. During the late 20th century, scientists examined the paternal lineages of Lemba men. The DNA results are a matter of scientific record. A substantial portion of Lemba Y chromosome lineages traced to populations outside sub-Saharan Africa, supporting an ancient paternal connection with the broader Middle East, the Red Sea world, and southern Arabia. A study published in 2000 found the original Cohen Modal Haplotype at a high frequency among sampled men of the senior Buba clan. The same low-resolution Y chromosome pattern had been found at notable frequency among Jewish Kohanim, whose priestly tradition traces patrilineally through Aaron, a descendant of Levi. For many Lemba, this was a powerful convergence. The clan remembered as priestly carried a paternal lineage connected with populations from the same broad region preserved in their oral history. This genetic finding is real. Its historical interpretation, however, must be described carefully. Later, high-resolution research confirmed substantial non-African paternal ancestry while finding that the available markers could not identify those ancestors uniquely as Jewish priests. The original Cohen Modal Haplotype is not exclusive to Kohanim, and related lineages also occur among Arabian and other Middle Eastern populations. DNA evidence therefore confirms a major Middle Eastern paternal contribution and confirms the reported presence of the original Cohen Modal Haplotype among sampled Buba men. It does not, by itself, document every stage of a journey from Jerusalem or prove a direct genealogical chain to Aaron. What it strongly supports is one of the Lemba tradition's central memories: paternal founders came into Africa from the wider Middle Eastern world, and a priest-associated Y chromosome pattern appeared in the clan remembered as priestly. Genetics did not create Lemba identity. It found traces consistent with a journey already carried in Lemba memory. The Lemba are African. Southern Africa became their permanent home, and their maternal ancestry is overwhelmingly African. Yet their oral tradition also remembers Judea, Jerusalem, Yemen, Senna, a sea crossing, and a long migration south. These memories form the chapters of one extraordinary story. The story remembers destruction in Jerusalem. It remembers Buba and the priestly clan. It remembers Senna across the sea. It remembers ships reaching Africa. It remembers the ngoma lungundu, the drum that thunders, and the laws the ancestors refused to surrender. The Lemba are the people of Senna, descendants of travelers, priests, traders, metalworkers, and African mothers. Their story begins in the memory of Jerusalem. It crosses Arabia and the sea. And it takes root in the soil of southern Africa. For more information, visit clovisstar.com.